Dave and I have 5 players ranked in the top 10 at their respective positions for Dynasty. But for some reason, we are ready to sell high on these players. Kicked us off here with Mark Andrews, tight end for the Baltimore Ravens. And I mean, a lot of people just saw the Ravens and kind of stinks. Ravens sort of, I don't want to say collapsed here towards in the AFC Championship, but I think there's going to be a lot more questions about Lamar, and some of them are accurate, some of them not so much. But Dave, Mark Andrews, he's been the top target for Baltimore for a while here. You've got him as your tight end 5. I also have him as my tight end 5. Football Guys consensus has him at tight end 4. So for you, is this a case where you're just like, Baltimore's got some more relevant pass catchers that have been added to the fold there, Zay Flowers, Isaiah Likely, and kind of just want to get out while you still can?
Yeah, and I think that's it. And I don't think that there's any reason. Like, I don't think you need to get out on Mark Andrews. It's not what I'm saying. But you look at his contract. He's got at best 2 years left with Baltimore. They could always extend him after that, but they've actually got a out in his contract that they could exercise this year. And he might not be on the team next year. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to happen for sure, but they got pretty much identical production from Isaiah Likely when Isaiah Likely took over as a starter when Andrews was injured. Until you got Zay Flowers there, who's been the promised one. Like, Lamar Jackson finally has his wide receiver one that we've been waiting for years. So Mark Andrews has been the number one guy in targets on this team for the last 3 or 4 seasons, and now all of a sudden he's splitting tight end snaps with Isaiah Likely. Both of them are going to be behind Zay Flowers. They might add another wide receiver in the draft or free agency this year. That seems to be what's missing from this Baltimore Ravens offense is multiple versatile wide receivers, and they tried it with Odell Beckham. Rashad Bateman probably isn't going to pan out, so I'm almost anticipating that they add another wide receiver here. But really, what it is I think Andrews. A lot of people still have those blinders on that he was a top one, top two tight end year after year after year, and I don't think that's what we're looking for or looking at anymore. So he's one of those guys. Like, if I could trade back and acquire more, I'd take on a Kyle Pitts, a David Njoku, a Travis Kelsey, George Kittle, Jake Ferguson, Cole Kmet. Try to move back a little bit on your tight end and accrue additional picks, or maybe another starting wide receiver or a veteran running back, something like that. I like Mark Andrews. I think he's a good player, but I think that some people might still have those goggles on when looking at Andrews, thinking of him as a top 2, top 3 guy. And I just don't know if that's the production we're going to be seeing.
Yeah, I think you and I are both leaning in the same direction, by the way. I think it's interesting. Our tight end rankings are almost identical, or they are identical actually for the top 7 tight ends, which is kind of crazy. We both have Mark Andrews as our tight end 6. We've got Kyle Pitts ahead of him.
Yeah.
And I think so much of that is just still, it's the youth for Kyle Pitts. He's still what, 22, 23 years,
Yeah.
he's 23 years old, right? Like, he's
Yeah.
still really young, same age as Dalton Kincaid, if I'm not mistaken. And now you've got a whole new era over there in Atlanta. I mean, maybe we're stepping on the rake again, but just to give you the idea, is we've got Mark Andrews just ahead of Travis Kelsey, but just behind Kyle Pitts. So, Dave, you mentioned some trades that you'd make, right? Like, maybe trading down at the tight end spot or elsewhere. I want to take a look at some other dynasty trades here involving Mark Andrews, and I want you to tell me which side you prefer. Okay, so Mark Andrews or Kenny Pickett and Dallas Goedert in a super flex tight end premium.
I think I'm going to stick with Andrews here. I've got
Sticking with
Goddard
Andrews.
a tier below Andrews, and honestly, you want to talk about a falling knife, Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be much left there for him. Mark Andrews or Tank Dell.
Give me Tank Dell easily. I think
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we're just way too low on him as a consensus. We talked a little bit about Nico Collins last week. I'm blown away by the gap between Nico Collins and Tank Dell. If you look at most consensus rankings right now, people are looking at Nico Collins as kind of a back end wide receiver one, and Tank Dell is at like the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 bubble. I think those guys should be much, much tighter. So we didn't talk about him last week, but when we were talking about guys skyrocketing up our rankings, or if we want to talk about buy lows or anything like that, I think Tank Dell is one of the guys that you should absolutely be trying to buy this offseason. Again, we talk about the recency bias. He ended the season injured, and then we saw Nico Collins go on a tear in the postseason. But give me as much Tank Dell as I can get. So,
And
yeah,
by the
I'll
way,
take Tank Dell
the,
over Andrews.
these are real trades. Like, I'm not just making these up off the top of my head. These are real trades that I found. The next one here, Mark Andrews, a 25 first and a 26 second for Brees Hall and a 26 third. So basically, Andrews a first and a second for Brees Hall and a third.
This one is tough. I think it kind of depends what you're doing. If you're trying to maybe rebuild a little bit, retire, retread, whatever you want to call it. I think I'll take Andrews and the picks. But if you're contending right now, Brees Hall, I mean, it's going to be hard to look at him as anything outside of a top three, top five running back for the next few years. So I'll go with the Andrews side here, unless you're contending and you really need a running back. Then I could make the argument for the Brees side, but I think I do like Andrews in the picks here.
This looks like one of those that even if you are contending, why are you getting rid of Mark Andrews? You kind of
Right.
need him. It seems like this was a very positionally specific thing.
And
Maybe
that's why
someone that
it's
had like
yeah,
Trey
definitely
McBride or
positioning.
something.
Yeah, because it's kinda weird to give up a young running back like Brees Hall, in exchange for a first round pick. So, I mean, it's kinda fair both ways. I think it's like, yeah, like you said, one team probably had a tight end and needed a running back, and the other team had a running back and needed a tight end.
All right, last one here. You talk about maybe going down a peg at tight end, but what about going up? Mark Andrews and a second round pick for Trey McBride.
Give me Trey McBride here. I wanna do whatever I can to get any of those big 3 that we talked about last year, the big young 3, I should say, Trey McBride, Sam Laporta, and Dalton Kincaid. So even tacking on a second to a veteran, I would take that same trade, what you said, Mark Andrews in a second for Trey McBride, Mark Andrews, George Kittle, Travis Kelce. I'd be trying to take any of those veterans, tack on a second, and move up for one of those elite young guys.
All right, so let's get to the next guy here on the list. And I've got another tight end, another player who was just playing in the games yesterday. It's George Kittle,
Oh,
tight
look
end
at
for the San
look at
Francisco
how
49ers.
topical we are. Look at us.
Yeah, that's right. SEO, baby. All right. George Kittle. Dave, you've got him as your tight end nine. I've got him as a tight end nine. Football Guys Consensus has him as a tight end nine. All right. Seems like we're all on the same page here. Good. To me, this is the kind of guy where it just kind of checks all the boxes in terms of there's enough positivity here where he has value to your league mates, but there's enough of the smoke signals up ahead where I'm kind of like, all right, I'm willing to move on. So from this season, George Kittle, he led all tight ends in yards, right? He was second in touchdowns among tight ends,
Mhm.
finished as a tight end six in fantasy. But then here's where some of those smoke signals start to show up. He's going to be 31 next season. Now we know that the whole age clip thing doesn't necessarily apply to freaks of nature. We've seen Travis Kelsey still be incredibly productive at an older age, but George Kittle is one of those guys where he's not getting the same type of target volume that Travis Kelsey is. He's not even in top two in targets per game on his team. Okay, I want to read to you some of the stats that are here for George Kittle on the Niners: 5.6 targets per game, which would have been 14th amongst all tight ends. And that was for the season. However, that drops down to just 5.1 targets per game when Debo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk are both healthy. That was a 12-game sample size from this year. 5 targets per game, not awesome to look at here when you're trying to, you're expecting really, really top tier production from your tight end. Last thing that I want to show here, and this was the trend that really got me scared. This is the lowest points per game that George Kittle has had in his last 6 seasons. And that's why I say that him finishing as tight end six is kind of a bit of the facade. He had those explosive plays. You're always going to get those explosive plays from George Kittle. But looking at it here, he went from 16.1 points to 15.9, 15.6, 14.1, 13.4, and then now 12.7. Listen, it may not be a huge drop off. Maybe next year he's still at around 12 points. He's still a top 8 tight end. But isn't that kind of the idea, right? Is to be able to sell these players before the wheels fall off, to sell high on guys before all that obvious value is gone. Dave, I know you did a study on George Kittle, and so I want to get your take on this.
Yeah, so one thing I think a lot of people are trying to sell George Kittle right now because they see the age 31 season coming up and they get a little bit scared about that. This is a time of year where I actually do try to buy some veterans because I feel like so many people, and again, talking dynasty, it's so much more than just player values and rankings and things like that. I think a big thing right now is when the season ends, people immediately try to ship the veterans off of their roster. And I think I don't want to say that George Kittle is like a buy low by any means, but I don't know if I'd necessarily be trying to move off of him right now. The study that I looked at is that his role changed quite a bit this year. The big concern with George Kittle was always that he was never running enough routes, that they were kind of using him as like a sixth offensive lineman. Well, this year he was third in route participation, which was a career high for him. He was running more routes than we've ever seen before. And, you talk about the fantasy points trending down. His yards per route run has actually been trending down for the last 4 seasons as well. This year he bounced back and had the highest yards per route run of his career since 2020. He also led the league in yards per route run. So the thing with George Kittle is you're looking at a volatile player. He does have those games
Yeah,
where
that's
he's just a blocker, and that kind of sucks. You got to
well.
ride the
What I
highs
was
with the
gonna
highs and the
say
lows with the
is
lows.
it seems like the numbers that you put out here kind of continue to emphasize the point. This is a guy who's going to be, like you said, volatile, but also efficient. Like, yeah, his yards per route run went up, but and his snaps went up too, right? Or excuse me, his routes
Routes run.
run went up.
Yeah,
Was that correct? Yeah. Okay. His routes run went up, and it's just kind of like, well, if all those things went up and there still just wasn't a lot of volume, that actually worries me that that's where we're at. It's just 12 points per game with everything being at career highs and some of the other analytics trending upward. It's kind of like, well, dang, even if the good numbers are going up and the only number that really matters at the end of this, the fantasy points per game, is going down, that makes me even more scared now. So I'm kind of happy you shared this.
yeah. I mean, the touchdowns dropped quite a bit. When I think he had 11 last year, and I think he only had 6 last year. So, or 6 this year. Well, I say last year. I don't know. Is this year or last year? 2 years ago, I believe he had 11 touchdowns. Last year, he had
Right.
6 touchdowns. So, but he bounced back in yards per route run. He bounced back in route participation. Bounced back in yards per game. So, what I see is that they aren't using him in this role that was so frustrating over the last couple of years, where he was kind of a blocker and a receiving tight end. It seems like in his age, they want him blocking less and they're using him as more of a receiver. So I don't think that we're ever going to see that, like, a high end production where he's going to be the overall tight end one or anything like that. But like we talked about, these freaks don't age the way that other players do. And I think that George Kittle probably still has another 4 to 5 years left in the tank where he could be 1,000-yard tight end. He can be second or third on the team in targets. And you might not be getting the elite production, but you can be looking at a top 5 to top 8 tight end for the next few years. And right now he's getting valued outside of that because of the downtrend in fantasy points.
Well, I've got him at tight end 9. So do you. So
Yeah.
does football guys. So I do think that we get maybe another one, maybe 2 seasons where he continues to be a top 10 dynasty tight end, or top 10, bringing you top 10 value, excuse me. But it's just, man, if so much of what he does and so much of the production comes off of these explosive plays, I don't know about you, man, but once I hit 30, me doing anything explosive was just very few and far between, except for in the bathroom. Hey,
So let me
um,
right. That's
I
disgusting,
threw
but
you
yeah,
off, didn't I? Yeah.
you did. But like right now, like let's say you're in a pinch and you need a tight end, you could probably flip a second round pick, like a mid second round pick for George Kittle. And I think in like an instance like that, if you need a tight end, that's kind of worth it because, like I said, you might not be getting the elite production, but his cost is so much cheaper than Travis Kelsey and Mark Andrews and the other veterans. It's significantly cheaper than the big three that we talked about. So I think that he's kind of a cheap veteran that you could buy if you're in a pinch for a tight end and you need immediate production.
Okay, so let's do some pricing back and forth here. Some dynasty trades that actually did happen involving George Kittle. George Kittle and a first round pick for Jalen Waddle, Cole Kmet, and a second.
I don't have a huge gap between Kittle and Komet, so basically I'll wash those out, and I'm looking at Waddle and
You're
a
looking
second for a
for
first. I mean,
first.
give me the Waddle side here.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. And actually don't, yeah, I am 100% with you. We'll talk more about it. Cole
Also,
Kmet
say
too.
Waddle is just the best player in
Good.
this package, and when you're
Yeah.
looking at big packages like that, you usually want to be the guy getting the best player. Big packages, like, oh, okay, we'll skip over that. Sorry,
I'm
Joe.
13 years old, man. Just yep. Yep. All right, George Kittle and Mike Evans for Kyle Pitts and a first.
This is a weird one to me.
This is a
Um,
flat out, like, someone was contending and went for it, or
yeah,
maybe they're contending this next
they
year,
probably
and
regret it a
and
bit.
and the other person is like, I'm just gonna rebuild and get rid of these veterans.
Yeah, I mean, I've got Pitts ahead of Kittle, and I'd prefer a first over Mike Evans. I don't really understand that trade. I'm taking Pitts in the first pretty easily.
Whoever made that trade, we're sorry. George Kittle and a second for Trey McBride. Considering you
And
were willing to
I
do
already
that for
said,
Mark Andrews,
yeah,
yeah.
when you said Mark Andrews, I said I'd flip Mark Andrews, Kelsey, any of these veterans in a second for McBride. So yeah, give me McBride on this side.
What if it was George Kittle in a first for McBride? What's the gauge? Because I want to see, because you and I both think very highly of McBride. I've got him as tight end one now as well in Dynasty.
I think I might take Kittle in a first in that instance.
Okay.
Depending on where the
Okay.
first is, if you're getting a top 5 pick, I think I'd probably take a top 5 pick in Kittle over McBride.
Man, Dynasty rookie draft picks to me are just like cars. They're so valuable until you pick the player. The second you drive it off the lot, it just loses its value. It's kind of,
Yeah,
it's so
everyone was
interesting
trading
to
their
me.
first this year, and then they use those first on Quentin Johnston, and
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Last one here: George Kittle and DK Metcalf for Caleb Williams. Not a pick, not the 101, but George Kittle and DK Metcalf for Caleb Williams in a super flex tight end premium league.
I think I'm going to go with Caleb Williams here, and I'll kind of lead us into the next person we want to talk about. But I think Caleb Williams, the second he's drafted, we're looking at him as a top 6, top 7 dynasty quarterback.
Yep, and that brings us to the next guy that we have here, which is Justin Herbert. Dave, you've nominated him as a sell high candidate here in Dynasty. You've got him as your quarterback 7. However, it does sound like you're going to have him move down a peg once Caleb Williams gets drafted, right?
Yeah, I think Caleb
I've
Williams
got
will
him.
fit right into that Burrow Herbert here and maybe be atop it.
Wow. Wow. I like it. I like it a lot. And then, so I've still got him at quarterback 7. Football Guys consensus has him at quarterback 6. This is interesting to me because, and you're going to have another player like this where I'm not so much saying that it's a bad move, but I'm confused by it and I want to ask questions to learn, right? So this seems like a guy who's right on the precipice of being elite. Like he's just right there, maybe doesn't have the necessary weapons around him or didn't have the coach around him. So what is it for you with Justin Herbert? Is it a Jim Harbaugh thing? Is it a Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler are getting a bit older thing? Like why is he all of a sudden a guy that we want to trade away?
Yeah, I mean, it's both of them. And again, you talk about the show, you said to bring
Both.
some sell highs. I'm talking about guys that you are selling high, guys that you can cash in for a ton on right now. So when we started talking about this, I started looking at consensus rankings and looking at the very top. Who are the guys at the top of these consensus rankings lists and these consensus values that I think you should probably try to move down from? And I think that Justin Herbert is exactly one of those guys. First of all, I love the Jim Harbaugh signing. I think Jim Harbaugh is a great coach. I don't think it's necessarily good for Justin Herbert, though. You look right now through his first 4 years, Justin Herbert has attempted more passes through his first 4 years than any quarterback in NFL history. And that's with missing a fair amount of games and being banged up in other games. You could say the 17 game season, but I looked at it. There's a lot of guys that have played more games than Justin Herbert through his first 4 years, and he is still averaging significantly more passing attempts than anybody else. Jim Harbaugh, we joke around about it a lot in the offseason. He's gonna run the snot out of the ball, just like your JV high school coach. That's what they're gonna want to do here. Like you look through Jim Harbaugh's entire career, whether it was at Stanford with Andrew Luck, maybe one of the best college quarterbacks in history. They were still a run first team at Stanford. Then he took over at San Francisco. They were a run first team. This year in Michigan, last year in Michigan, every year he's been at Michigan, they've been a run first team. And I think that's kind of my fear here is that we're not going to see Justin Herbert throwing the ball like he did through his first few seasons. Like I said, I like him as a coach for the Chargers. I think it was a great hire, but I think people are going to get excited because they're going to think, oh, Jim Harbaugh, former quarterback, he's going to be a quarterback whisperer. He's going to bring out the best in Justin Herbert. And I think if anything, we're just going to see less passing volume under Harbaugh than we have through the first few years for Herbert.
There were rumors that Harbaugh might actually look to bring in Greg Roman as the San Francisco 49ers offensive coordinator. He was the offensive coordinator for the 49ers when Colin Kaepernick was
Mm-hmm.
there. He
Got
was
ties
the
with the
offensive
brother.
coordinator for the Ravens
Yep.
with Lamar Jackson, where
And
everyone was
John
complaining,
Harbaugh.
he doesn't throw enough. Yep. And so, yeah, I get it. I get the concerns. I also like kind of look at the roster and I go, if he wants to try to run the ball, he's got the wrong team. Because I don't know that he's going to get that with Austin Eckler. He's going to have to draft
Oh,
a running
Austin
back,
Eckler is
sign
as
a
good as
running
gone.
back.
There,
Yeah, like I
yeah,
think he's retiring.
he's bringing in
I
Blake Corum in the second round. You know that's going to happen, right?
Oh man, oh man. I'm going to be very intrigued to watch what happens to this Los Angeles Chargers team. Dave, let's look at some dynasty trades involving Justin Herbert. You talk about selling high. Well, these trades are Willie Nelson, my friend. Justin Herbert for Jordan Love in a second.
Yeah, give me Jordan Love. I think that's what you should be doing. Like if I'm recommending selling high on Justin Herbert, this is exactly what you should be doing is moving down a few quarterbacks and adding on an additional pick or a starter or whatever it is that your team needs. So, yeah, I think there's a gap between Justin Herbert and Jordan Love, of course, but you're filling that gap with the second round pick. So, give me Jordan Love in the second.
Herbert and a second for Justin Fields and Mike Evans.
I'll take Herbert and the second here. That might be foolish of me because we don't know that it's the uncertainty with Justin Fields. And really, I want to say go out and buy Justin Fields because right now we're talking about the best case scenarios, him landing with Atlanta or
Oh,
San
man.
Francisco or whatever it may be. But it's tough right now because there's also a universe that exists where Justin Fields is a backup next year.
Justin Herbert or Matthew Stafford and a 24 first.
I'll take Stafford in the first here, especially on a contending roster. Still probably looking at back end QB1 production. Am I crazy to think that, like, if we look over the next 2 years, Matthew Stafford, Justin Herbert are probably going to give us pretty similar production? You've obviously got the longevity with Herbert because he's younger, but I think you're making up for that with the first.
I'm intrigued by that. I do think we maybe get like 2 more years of Matthew Stafford. I don't
Right.
know how good it's going to be, but I think that you're probably gonna get some better rushing production from a guy like Herbert. I don't think that Harbaugh comes in and just sort of like, nah, we're gonna really run the snot out of the ball to like so much to the detriment of Herbert. I think what we're probably gonna see is maybe some more efficient passing plays from Herbert. So yeah, that volume might go down, but I think we see a more efficient offense. Last one here, Justin Herbert and Michael Mayer for Jalen Hurts.
I'll take Mayer here. And I'm actually I got it pulled up right now. Keep trade cut. It's a little reactive. I'm not going to say it's the Bible by any means.
But it's all crowdsourced. Like
Yeah.
these are just people. These are the same people that pick our president. They're picking they're picking, dynasty players.
Well, Jalen Hurts has fallen all the way to QB7 on keep trade cut. He's now
Sheesh.
behind Burrow and behind Herbert. So yeah, let's
All
see.
right.
I mean, he's already getting tight on Anthony Richardson. Don't be surprised if we see Richardson jump Hurts in the next few weeks here.
Oh man, well, we're gonna go a little faster. I just realized we are behind. We got three more players that we're gonna talk about here. Next guy on this list, tight end. Looking at David Njoku, and Dave, you have got him at your tight end 8. I've got him at tight end 10. Football Guys consensus has him at tight end 10. And honestly, even as I was doing this whole research and looking at my rankings, I actually think there's a legitimate case for me to be like, I might make him my tight end 12. I think that this is to me a classic case of all of us kind of getting a little bit of that recency bias with David Njoku. And what I mean is this: everything looks good on the outside. David Njoku was third in targets this year, fifth in receptions, sixth in yards, second, tied for second in touchdowns. He finishes a tight end 5 in PPR, ahead of George Kittle, who we were just talking about before. And I get it. He's 27 years old. He's an athletic freak. He's got the first round draft capital, 2 more years on his contract. Everything just seems rosy, right, for David Njoku. The problem is that all this success that happened late in the season happened without his starting quarterback, Deshaun Watson. And we don't really think that that is going to be changing anytime soon. Deshaun Watson will have to really just implode to the point where he is just unable to be put on the field by Kevin Stefanski because the Browns have so much money tied into him. They're trying to make this work. Okay, let me give you the split here between David Njoku with Joe Flacco versus Deshaun Watson. Okay, with Joe Flacco, David Njoku 18.2 PPR points per game. With Deshaun Watson, 8.8. 8.8. I'm just going to repeat that. Less than 9 fantasy points per game. For reference, if you want some context, last year, that would have made him the tight end 16 in points per game between Taysom Hill and Hunter Henry. But this is a guy that we're all valuing as a top 10, myself included. And I'm even considering, like, should I really? Now, I think the hope is Deshaun Watson gets better. David Njoku has finally broken out. He has earned more targets. I get the context of that, but I think just seeing the splits between how good David Njoku could be and how much Deshaun Watson holds him back, it really makes me start to question. I think it starts to bring up the conversation of maybe I should have David Njoku behind guys like Jake Ferguson and Cole Kmet in my dynasty rankings. Dave, you've got him a bit higher than I do. You've got him at tight end 8. I've got him at tight end 10, and I'm flirting with tight end 12 at the moment. So, what keeps you, I guess, let's say, a little faithful in David Njoku?
Just that he's still young and that he's really, really talented. Tight ends typically don't hit their best seasons until age 28, and David Njoku isn't even there yet. So we see him starting to warm up right now. We saw Kelsey on that path. We've seen, hopefully Kyle Pitts is on that path. We saw Evan Ingram on that path. These guys only get better as they age, and I think that David Njoku is right about to hit his elite potential that we've been waiting for since he got drafted. This guy came into the league super young. He was kind of Kyle Pitts before Kyle Pitts was Kyle Pitts, where he had all the
Right.
athletic measurables and we got really excited about him and he kind of face planted early in his career and then we gave up hope. And now I think is a good time to buy in on him. I agree with everything you're saying, though. I mean, if you look at Deshaun Watson's entire career, he's just been kryptonite for fantasy tight ends. Like he does not target tight ends the way that we want to see a quarterback target tight ends. But I'm just betting on the talent here. David Njoku is a good player. He's got an out in his contract over this year, but it's hard to look beyond the things that you pointed out. He sucked with Deshaun Watson, and then you look at his usage in Cleveland; it's also been terrible. I mean, this is a guy that realistically should just be lining up in the slot, lining up out wide. Like he is a receiver, and Cleveland is putting him in line on over 50% of their offensive snaps. So I don't like the usage. I don't like the quarterback. I'm just buying him now in the hopes that maybe he has that late career Evan Ingram type of breakout on a new team. And I just want to see him out of Cleveland after this year.
See, well, after he's got 2 more years. So he's
They've got
got
an out in
24
his
and 20.
contract after 2024.
Yeah, we hope.
And
We
they'll
hope.
save like $19 million by cutting him. So that's kind of the hope is that they do cut him after this year.
We'll hope. But that's so that's kind of like where I'm at, right? Is if this is the highest value, which it does appear that that's what it is. This is the highest value he's been at in his career. I I don't know that I'm willing to make the bet that's going to continue to go up this next season, going into the 24 or 25 season, right? With Deshaun Watson back under center, and then hoping that maybe he ends up on a new team in 2 years. I'd rather just take the money I've got, right? Like walk away from the table with the money I've got. Dave, I want to put some dynasty trades here in front of you involving David Njoku. So Njoku, a first and a second for Kyron Williams.
Hmm. I think I'll take Njoku here with the picks, a first and a second. Yeah, I'll take that. And I don't want to get too off, on a tangent here, but Kyron Williams right now, I
Don't
think
do
is
it.
like the RB5.
Don't do it.
Talk about another sell high in Dynasty. Don't get me wrong, I like Kyron Williams going into next season, but talking Dynasty, if you're looking at a fifth round guy, undersized, all the things that we talked about early in the season that we didn't like, Kyron Williams is probably a guy that you should be moving off of if he's getting in the Achane, Travis Etienne, Kenneth Walker tier. I did it. I said it.
Okay, moving on. David Njoku and a third for Marquise Brown in a second.
David Njoku and a third for Marquise Brown and a second. I think I'll take Marquise Brown here.
Okay. David Njoku for a second, an early second, excuse me, and a third round pick.
David Njoku. Sorry, one more time.
For Njoku, it's right in front of you, you crazy person. David Njoku for an early second and a third.
Give me the picks.
Okay. All right, picks. And then so last, I'm assuming it's going to be picks again here. So David Njoku for a late first.
Yeah, I'll take the first.
Yeah, I think there are going to be some teams like that they were really good this past year and they convinced themselves I was just a good tight end away. I didn't have the good tight end. Njoku is the guy that's going to break out, right? Age 28 season. You're able to probably get a late round first for him.
And really, the buy window is going to open up when the season starts and Njoku isn't doing well with Deshaun Watson. That's when you really want to buy low on Njoku. So I'll agree. Yeah, sure. You can sell on him now and buy low when he starts off the season cold with Watson again.
And you know what else I forgot too, which also makes him a sell high. Harrison Bryant's about to be a free agent. And so there's now possibly even, I know he wasn't a big deal, but that's just a little more ammunition, right? Like that's another arrow in the quiver of like, well, David Njoku is going to get all the tight end snaps now. So I think there's just enough there where the vibes seem good enough. Where you
I think the best case scenario is that Amari Cooper is going into his age 30 season. He's going to be 30 in a couple of months here. And I want to see them just change how they use David Njoku. Like I said, over 50% of his snaps came in line last year. That's crazy. Just use this guy as a receiver.
I just don't trust them to use him right. I don't trust them to use him over Amari or Deshaun to actually use him. Like there's so many things that I'm just like, eh.
you got to hope what they saw late in the year that, oh, when we get the ball in this guy's hand, he can do amazing things after the catch. He's a good route runner. He can make contested catches. You hope that they see that and say, hey, let's use this guy as more of a receiver and less of a traditional tight end.
When you said, "I hope that they see that they've got to get the ball in this guy's hand," I thought you were talking about Joe Flacco, and I got really excited. All right, let's move on to our next player here. Dave, they're going to drag you for this one, but I'm excited to talk about it. Achane, running back for the Miami Dolphins, is a player that you are willing to sell high right now in Dynasty. You have him as your running back 9. I've got him as the running back 6. Football Guys consensus has him as the running back 7. I think it's safe to say pretty much everybody has him as a top 10 Dynasty running back. To me and to many other people, this might seem absolutely crazy, but I want to hear you out. I want the talking points. I want to see where your brain is at, where you're saying, okay, I justify selling a very talented 22-year-old in his second year on a good offense at a position where there's not a lot of guys getting touches. So, what's the thought process there?
I mean, you said you wanted to talk about sell highs. And Achane is a guy right now who's being ranked very, very highly. And to
But do
me,
we get to a point where we're just kind of like selling high because they're up high? Like, is
yeah,
sometimes you do want to keep them though? No.
I mean, I'd rather keep the guys that have better profiles, the Jahmyr Gibbs, Brees Hall, Bijan Robinson, Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor. I'd rather keep those guys. I think that with Achan creeping into that territory, you should be looking to sell him. And right now, if you look at most consensus rankings, Achan is either right alongside or ahead of guys like Travis Etienne, a first round pick, James Cook, a second round pick, Kenneth Walker, a second round pick, Rashad White, Saquon Barkley, Isaiah Pacheco. And those are the guys that I think if you look over the next few years, the production is going to be pretty similar between Achan and all of those guys. So right now you could trade back and get an ETN, Cook, Walker, White, Saquon, Pacheco, Barkley, one of these guys, and still add additional assets to that side. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not saying that you need to trade Achan away because he's a bust or that he sucks or anything like that. I just think that we have inflated his value to the point that it does make sense to trade back, stay within that tier, maybe move down a tier and get some extra on top. First of all, I think Achan is a great player. You know, what he did on a per touch basis last year is something we've never really seen before. But I think that's kind of what we're going to see is him in a complementary role. I mean, even when a 31-year-old Raheem Mostert was healthy this year, that's what Achan did was kind of play in a complementary role to Raheem Mostert. I think that they are almost assuredly going to add a running back in free agency or the draft this year. This is a loaded free agency class. So I think that Achan could still be productive. We're going to see those huge boom weeks. Probably going to finish the season as a top 10 to top 15 running back. But I think that if you can take a guy who's probably going to be getting somewhere around 8 to 10 carries and 4 to 5 targets per game and swap him out for a guy, all those names that I mentioned, Rashad White, Travis Etienne, all those guys that are going to be seeing 15 to 20 touches per game, I'd rather take the workhorses that are probably going to have a little bit more, less week to week volatility and probably a safer long term future than a guy like Achan, who very good. Don't get me wrong, but I think that, ranking him as a top 6, top 7, top 8 guy is probably just a little too steep.
But top 9, that's the spot.
I mean, yeah, like right now
I'm just messing with you.
I've got him in the same tier as Rashad White, Kenneth Walker, Saquon Barkley, Isaiah Pacheco. So if I can get any of
Yeah.
those guys and additional, if I can get a second or third round pick on top of that, if I can get a veteran wide receiver, any sort of starting caliber player in addition to Devon Achane, and I can get one of those other running backs, I'm doing that.
I think there's just enough of these guys where they all have their warts, right? Like Jonathan Taylor, for as supremely talented as he is, he's young as well. He's had injuries. Now he's got a running quarterback that could be stealing goal line carries from him, very similar to how Jalen Hurts did in Philly. You're probably not going to see as many checkdowns to him. And that's kind of where I have Devon Chan ranked, just right behind Jonathan Taylor. And all those other guys you start to mention, Ken Walker. I mean, you pounded the drum all season for a guy like Zach Charbonnet. So I think a lot of these guys just come with their warts. I'm intrigued by the one you mentioned the most here, which was Rashad White. Because you and I need to be in more dynasty leagues together because I would absolutely trade you Rashad White right now for Devon Achane. I don't know that Rashad White's volume is as guaranteed as we think, especially since the Bucks were last in rushing this past season. I I'm sorry, did you say you had White ahead of Achane or in the same tier as him?
In the same tier, and I'm looking
Okay.
also at keep trade cut right now. I mean, there's a big gap between those guys. Achane's the RB6, Rashad White's the RB11. So if I'm
Mm, okay.
trading Rashad White for Devon Achane, I'd expect a little juice on my side. Throw in a second round pick, throw in
Right.
another player to sweeten the deal, and that's where I think that you move off of a guy like Devon Achane if you can get one of these running backs ranked behind him and additional picks on top of it.
I can agree with you that I think his value might be a little inflated right now, and I think so much of that just comes from uncertainty. I think there is a case here for him to be behind a guy like Travis Etienne and some of these other running backs. So I can get with that. I think it's a little inflated. I think where the question comes in is what are you going to get in return? So if he is being viewed as like the running back 5 or 6, but in reality you see him as the running back 8 or 9, what are you going to get in return that's really going to make that worth your while? Are you just better off keeping him because he's a top 10 dynasty running back and so young? Let's take a look at some examples here. So dynasty trades involving Devon Achane, Dalton Kincaid in a second for Achane.
Yeah, give me Dalton Kincaid easily.
Josh Jacobs and Khalil Shakir, who might be the new actually leading wide receiver for the Bills if Stephon Diggs is gone. So Achan or Jacobs and Shakir.
I'll take Jacobs and Shakir. I think Jacobs is another guy who's just way too suppressed in value right now. So yeah, I'll take Jacobs and Shakir there.
Devon Achan or Bryce Young and a late first round pick in a super flex league.
I'll take Bryce Young here. We talked about it briefly last week. I think that there's kind of a buy window open for Bryce right now. You look at the floor to ceiling outcomes for number one overall picks. It's more likely that Bryce Young is going to be a starter for the next 5+ years than he is going to be the next Jamarcus Russell or Tim Couch. So I'll take Bryce Young in the pick here.
I actually think that is a perfect trade for someone
Yeah.
to be making right now. That and the Dalton Kincaid trade. I like both of those. Josh Jacobs, we'll see. We'll see. I don't know if he resigns with Las Vegas, then yeah, that's all of these. I would actually take the other side over Achan. But this just kind of shows you where the value is. Last one here: Devon Achan and a first or Amon-Ra St. Brown.
This one's tough. I do like Amon-Ra St. Brown a lot. But Achan and a first. I think
Like, let's say that
I'll
first
lean
turns into like
Amon-Ra
a
here.
Roma Dunze or something.
Yeah, I think I'll still lean Amon-Ra here because Roma Dunze could be anything,
Yeah,
even an Amon-Ra St.
even
Brown.
Roma Dunze. Yeah, you know what? It's funny because like we talk about this and I was like, yeah, that's kind of crazy, but it's just like this is what he's going for. It's kind of like the person says, I'd never move out of my home. And then, property manager comes by and it's like, we'll give you $1 million. You're like, all right, I'm out.
Yep.
Like that's
Yep.
that's kind of where we're at with Devon Achan. All right, last guy on here. I'm ready to sell high on Aaron Jones. Dave, you've got him as the running back 31 in Dynasty. I've got him at running back 26, so just a little bit ahead. Football guys consensus, we need to have a staff meeting because they've got him as the running back 21 right now. It's a bit rich for my taste. The way I look at this, Dave, Aaron Jones to me is like being on a road trip. It's been a lot of fun. There have been a lot of cool stops along the way. But this season, going into 2024, this is kind of like where you see the sign that says last exit for 100 miles. So if you need to go to the bathroom, go now. He's 29 years old. We all know the age cliff rule. He missed a lot of games with injuries this past season. AJ Dillon's going to be a free agent. The running back that they either sign or draft can be a much bigger threat to the receiving work that Aaron Jones has. Imagine if they went out and got like a Tajay Spears type of guy on that team. There's so many other good young receivers on this team. There may be a big a pass heavy approach. I think the thing is that the vibes are good right now. The Packers are a good, cool, young team. AJ Dillon, like I said, is going to be hitting free agency. Aaron Jones crushed in his final games there in the playoffs. So you have this wave that you can ride, but you kind of need to get off on this exit and go use the bathroom, man, or else you're going to crap your pants. And that's what I don't want if I'm the Aaron Jones dynasty manager right now. I think there are other guys in similar situations that are going to be so much harder to sell, like Stephon Diggs and Austin Eckler, where you're just going to be caught pooping your pants there. But Aaron Jones, you've got some good vibes where you could actually
Way too much
sell
poop
him.
talk on this episode. Way too much.
Yeah, you could tell we're in the off
We have
season.
hit our poop quota.
No, never a limit, never enough. But I think so it's Aaron Jones, and then I think another guy that you can do this with is Derrick Henry. I think that as much as people have been saying for like 4 years. Sell Derrick Henry. It's time. I think he's going to see himself get another positive vibes push because of free agency. People are going to convince themselves he's going to go sign with the Ravens and compete for a
Yeah.
title.
I'd hold
Or
Derrick
he's,
Henry until he signs, because as soon as he signs with a
yeah,
team, he's going to sign with a contender. It's going to be the Eagles, the Ravens, one of those teams. Then you sell Derrick Henry because his price is just going to.
you can push the narrative with whoever he signs with. The
Mhm.
Houston Texans, oh, they're going to use him nonstop. They're
Yeah.
competing for the AFC. He goes to the Chargers. Oh, Jim Harbaugh loves to run the snot out of the ball. There are so many narratives here. Just wait for him to sign somewhere, and that's it. And that's why I kind of think it's the same thing with Aaron Jones. The second that everyone's talking about, oh, that's right, AJ Dillon's a free agent. Aaron Jones, whoa. I'd be selling him now before free agency and before the NFL draft because that's when the Packers can all make their moves. Dave, let's take a look at some dynasty trades that are involving Aaron Jones here. It sounds like there's like zero pushback from you. You're like, yep, this is obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So dynasty trades involving Aaron Jones. Jones for an early second round pick.
I'll take the early second here.
Aaron Jones and Khalil Shakir for Ramondre Stevenson.
Here, I'll take Aaron Jones and Khalil Shakir. A few of these trades that you've thrown out here involve Khalil Shakir, and I'm a little more bullish on Shakir than I think of a lot of other people.
Me
So
too. Let's
if we're
go.
if we're talking about like another guy in like the wide receiver 40, wide receiver 50 range, I might lean the Ramadre side, but Shakir is more than enough to sweeten the pot for me here.
Aaron Jones and Matthew Stafford for Justin Herbert in Superflex.
I mean, this one is so obviously just, are you contending? Like, if that's what you need to push you over the edge, you need a starting running back and you need a
Yeah.
starting quarterback. Sure, take the veterans here, but I think in most instances, I'm going to lean Justin Herbert. But I could totally understand why a team might want Jones and Stafford.
It seems like honestly, like Aaron Jones is just kind of the throw in, and the value here, the almost exact value is Aaron Jones or a second round rookie pick. And that's
Mhm.
just kind of where it is.
Right.
And so that's something that we actually didn't talk about too much on this episode, which is understanding your league mates in Dynasty, I think is so much more important than anything. I think that's kind of where the vibes go into. Like all talking about how people are perceiving these players. It matters what your league mates like. If you have guys that are like, no, I only want young running backs, and I'll draft my wide receivers, I'll trade for running backs, I'll do this, I'll do that, like whatever. You've got to know your league mates, and so the context that you gave there, Dave, for that one of a contender, yes, 100%. Like that's what you need when talking about these trades. Last one here, and this one I'm sure has some interesting context. Aaron Jones and Jackson Smith Najigba for Kyron Williams and a second round pick.
I mean, give me JSN pretty easily here. You
Yeah.
talk about wanting to get the best player in the trade. Is this really how low consensus is on JSN now? I mean,
I think it's the other way around. I think that's just how high people are on Kyron.
I guess, but I mean, I think that both of those are, we're probably too high on Kyron and too low on JSN. So I'm taking that JSN side all day.
Well, there it is. Let's recap. Okay, we've got all of our players that we are looking to sell high here in Dynasty. Let's go through these names once again. Dave, you're looking to sell Mark Andrews. I'm looking to sell George Kittle. Dave, you are also looking to sell Justin Herbert. I've got David Njoku on here. Dave, you've got Devon Achane, and then I've got Aaron Jones. You've also got Justin Herbert as well. So for players that were looking to sell high here in Dynasty, I think this was a good approach. We each kind of went like guys right before the age cliff or guys that, like you said, you're selling them as high as possible. We're talking Snoop Dogg, Willie Nelson, like they are top 5 at their position. That's where they need to be. So, Dave, thank you so much. This was an awesome show. Once again, we're going to be back again next week. The new topic, we're going to be continuing to hit these dynasty topics. We're going to be talking about rookies very soon. We've got the Shrine Bowl and Senior Bowl all kicking off. And Dave, we haven't decided what our topic's going to be next week, but I think it might have something to do with rookies. I don't know.
Let's do it.
We'll figure it
Yeah.
out. All right. Then we're going to be back next week with rookies. Look at that. We just figured it out here on the show. We'll see you next week, everybody. Adios.